get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our AI adoption series. I'm Kristen from the iPipeline marketing team, and I am thrilled to have you all here with us today. I'm joined by Matthew Collier. He leads our AI Center of Excellence, and Steve Cover, who is our Chief Technology Officer, and both bring deep expertise in AI strategy and implementation. Last time on our first session, we focused on the foundations of AI in the life insurance, wealth management, and financial services industries. And today we're switching gears a little bit to talk about what leaders need to know before scaling AI. And this is where things get real. Compliance, security, and trust become critical. So we'll explore how to navigate these challenges and build a responsible AI strategy that sets your organization up for long-term success. Due to the large number of individuals who are tuning in today, we have disabled the chat feature, but we will be taking questions and we'll wrap up this session with an open Q&A, so feel free to drop your questions in that Q&A box. And if you're interested in learning more about how to manage real-world risk while unlocking AI's potential, we'd love to connect after the webinar. All right, well, I think we can get started. I'm going to pass it on over to Matthew and Steve to kick us off.
Thanks everyone for joining today. I'm going to start by just defining what we mean when we talk about an AI system. And this particular description, this is paraphrased from EU legislation, but the key points to pull out, we're talking about a system that is autonomous, right? So this is something that can act with minimal or no human oversight. It's something that can make decisions, and those decisions are going to be based on data. Those decisions are going to have real-world impacts on the user's experience of that platform. And they're also adaptive, they change. So even after deployment, the responses are going to have a degree of variation, a degree of fluctuation in them, which sets them apart from maybe traditional software systems. So these are systems that exhibit human-like behavior, autonomy, variation, adaptiveness. And it's this human-like behavior that really gives rise to some of the new challenges that we're going to talk about today. This is what we're trying to avoid. So these are all real headlines and examples of where an AI system has caused real-world damaging consequences for customers and for businesses. A chatbot has encouraged someone to break the law. An airline has been ordered to pay a customer who was misled by their online chatbot. So as we look to scale our own use of AI, it's these kind of consequences that are often top of our mind and can act as barriers to adoption and rollout. And it's because AIs can hallucinate. They can say things that sound really credible and they sound true, but they're actually half-truths or they're out of context. Or in some cases, they might be completely made up, they're fabrications altogether. There's that variation or consistency or fluctuation in the output, meaning that if you ask the same question 5 times, you're probably going to get 5 slightly different answers. This is just a feature of the system, but it can make it hard to have trust, and it can create additional challenges around testing and around QA. We often see AI sometimes as just a black box as well. We don't really understand why it said what it said, why it did what it did, how it's arriving at its conclusions and decisions. And these things, again, can kind of make it a little hard to trust those AI platforms. Because these behaviors have consequences, they have real-world consequences, just like we saw on the headlines, legal and financial penalties, lasting reputational damage. So there's a temptation there to just ignore AI altogether. If we don't deploy it and we don't use it, we can protect ourselves from these risks. But if we did that, we would be missing out on unparalleled opportunities that AI offers, better ways to engage with customers through real-time online assistance and personalized experiences, extracting critical business insights that can drive up placement, and automation of underwriting, automation of forms processing, transforming businesses. So this actually becomes a balancing act, risk versus reward. How do we extract those benefits of AI whilst protecting ourselves from those unintended negative consequences? And it's this balance between risk and reward that we're going to focus on through the rest of this webinar.
So let's dive in a little onto the risk side of things. So Matthew talked earlier about AI making decisions and AI being autonomous. Artificial intelligence is really transforming decision making across all industries, and but as we know, with great power comes great responsibility. So let's take a few minutes to explore the risks that are tied to AI decisions, specifically around fairness, accuracy, and the challenges that many organizations face in managing these risks. So let's start by talking about fairness. So AI systems learn from historical data. Historical data often carries societal biases. So if unchecked, these biases can lead to discriminatory outcomes in hiring and lending and insurance and healthcare, law enforcement, really anywhere that that information is used. And unfair AI decisions can erode trust as a result. It can invite regulatory scrutiny and can result in reputational damage, as some of the examples that Matthew showed a few minutes ago. So ethical AI is not just a compliance issue, it really is a business imperative. And at iPipeline, we've created our AI adoption framework with an emphasis on bias testing, clear guardrails, and really making sure they have the governance around AI generated content. But even a fair AI system is only as good as the data it's trained on. Poor data quality or lack of contextual grounding can lead to inaccurate predictions. And in high stakes areas like financial advice, this can have severe consequences. Many AI models operate as black boxes, which really kind of make it hard to understand why a decision was made. So explainable AI is critical for accountability and for meeting emerging regulatory requirements. Now, this leads to some key challenges that come from AI decisions. First, let's talk about fairness and accuracy are kind of a trade-off that you end up having to make. Really, because improving fairness can sometimes reduce accuracy and vice versa. So as organizations that are adopting AI and producing AI, we need to balance these competing priorities without compromising our ethical standards. So regulatory and ethical complexity then also folds in because global AI ethics frameworks vary widely, making compliance very difficult. And what counts as fair and responsible differs from one jurisdiction or from one sector to another. Security and governance risks continue to be a challenge that we need to address. And that, really kind of goes beyond fairness and accuracy because AI introduces risks like prompt injection, deep fakes, misuse of personal data. And so strong governance and proactive risk management are essential to the adoption of AI. So even more specifically in the life and annuity industries, there's a couple topics that we're concerned about. So let's first look at AI in financial advice, as this brings with it both opportunity and risk. AI promises personalized financial insights and faster decision making. However, generative AI tools often lack regulatory compliance and contextual understanding, which can lead to inaccurate or misleading advice. Studies show that while AI can democratize access to financial planning, it still struggles with nuanced judgment and transparency. This can lead to an over-reliance on AI without human oversight, and that can really amplify the biases and errors that I mentioned earlier. We also need to ensure there's a disclosure when AI is used in advisory roles to make sure that we're building trust. So when possible, want to make sure we recommend positioning AI as a complement, not a replacement for human expertise. Implement licensed enterprise-grade AI tools and maintain transparency with clients really as you kind of increase your AI involvement. So now let's talk a little bit about the management of personally identifiable information. AI systems thrive on data. I think that's one thing that we all know, but we've all got to make sure we ground ourselves in. But if you don't properly manage that data, the data can include sensitive personal information. With this, we see the risk of unauthorized data collection, model leakage, and exposure through AI-driven conversations. So this will bring challenges in terms of things like large language models that could inadvertently memorize and reveal personal details. And as you really get into the compliance side, when you think about regulations like GDPR, CCPA, and other emerging AI-specific regulations, there's a lot of complexity that comes with that. And so some strategies that you can focus on to mitigate these challenges are to use PII redaction and anonymization in training and operational data sets. Make sure you're adopting privacy-preserving technologies like encryption and also how you're de-identifying data if you want to leverage it in an aggregated manner. And also make sure that you're implementing robust governance and conducting regular audits for compliance. Now, lastly, let's talk just a little bit about accountability. Who's responsible when AI makes a wrong decision? That is definitely a question that's on all of our minds. Who's really responsible for what AI does? And current frameworks are struggling with the black box nature of AI. So without defining clear guardrails, accountability easily can become fragmented across the developers of it, the deployers of it, the users of it, and really kind of trying to create clarity into where that accountability lies. And so some of the emerging solutions that we see is really focusing on explainable AI. So making sure that decisions can be traced and understood and audited, having shared responsibility models. So these are things like oversight committees, audits, clear escalation paths. Make sure that you're focusing on the regulatory trends because global efforts in the EU, like the EU AI Act, and at state level, US laws are pushing for mandatory transparency and human in the loop governance. So really want to make sure that we continue our focus on all three of these topics. And let's really drive forward and talk a little bit about some of the barriers that we're seeing in the industry with this adoption. So artificial intelligence, really promises transformative benefits, right? There's a whole lot of promises around AI itself, but adoption isn't as simple as just turning on it or flipping a switch. Our organizations face real barriers, things like skills gaps, fear, and technology hurdles that can really slow our progress. So let's break these down a little bit and maybe talk about how to overcome them. So starting with skills, um, you know, AI requires specialized knowledge. There's data science, there's machine learning, there's governance, all of the compliance things I've been talking about, and many organizations lack one or more of these capabilities. And we're seeing examples in the industry of insufficient AI literacy and technical expertise being some of the top risks during AI transformation. Without skilled talent, AI projects are more likely to stall or fail, or they won't even, or you won't get the scale out of them that you're looking for. So really focusing on enhanced training is one of the top priorities for successful AI adoption. Some options for addressing the skills gap, and I think we're following many of these, is, in some cases, invest in upskilling or reskilling programs, creating an AI center of excellence, which we have that, Matthew leads for us, fostering a culture of continuous learning, bringing in pilot projects, expanding those as confidence grows, even looking to bring in skilled, experts that have the expertise in areas that you're lacking. So really, I recommend looking across the board at all of the different ways that you can fill in your skills gaps because there probably isn't a one size fits all answer here. And part of this then leads into the next one around fear and resistance, because this really is a big barrier that we see in the market. People are afraid. They're afraid of job losses. They're afraid of ethical concerns. They're uncertain about what AI's role is. And that's really creating resistance to adoption. And so a piece of that comes from the skill side is that, there's a fear around the unknown, fear of what you don't understand. And so some of that training and enablement I just talked about will help with some of these fears and really making sure you have an internal strategy that emphasizes kind of the cultural adaptation and change management around these anxieties. Because AI phobia isn't just a hesitation. It in some cases is a psychological barrier that can derail the innovation that you're going for. AI related fears are very prevalent in the market and are fueled by the hype, all that hype that you see around AI adoption, job impacts, and the unknowns that come with it. So, to address this, focus on communication, transparent communication. Involve your employees early in your pilot programs. Frame AI as an augmentation tool, not a replacement. Because a lot of what we're seeing with AI is that it can make humans way more effective, way more efficient. We're not seeing as many examples where it is a hardcore replacement, especially in knowledge work at this time. Celebrate the wins that you get, share success stories, and really focus on building trust in the organization. Now, not surprisingly, with such a transformation, all of this driven by innovation, we're also seeing technology challenges to adoption. Right, our legacy infrastructures, our data silos, the complexity of integration of our systems all make AI implementation difficult. You could see these surface as system integration, cybersecurity vulnerabilities, and this barrier can really be a large risk for your adoption because even the best AI models will fail without a robust infrastructure. Outdated systems can't handle the high density AI workloads, and and ensuring compliance with evolving regulations is way more challenging with really kind of outdated infrastructure. So as you build your AI strategy, Make sure you're including steps to modernize infrastructure where you need to. Adopt kind of phased implementation strategies. Don't try to do it all at once. Don't try to go big bang. Make sure that you're focused on the business value that comes from your AI adoption. And not to continue on the same topic, but prioritize data governance, prioritize compliance, prioritize security. Overcoming these barriers really isn't an option. It's essential for you to stay competitive. So by investing in skills, addressing the fear through transparency and upgrading, people's skill sets, upgrading technologies, I believe that we can unlock AI's full potential and drive sustainable innovation.
How do we build trust in AI? I think there are 4 pillars. We need our AI systems to be accurate. We need the information to be relevant, useful, and correct. We need them to be reliable. We need to make sure we have confidence that they're going to behave consistently in production and in front of our customers. We, of course, need them to be secure. AI is founded on data, as Steve said, and keeping that data safe is always our top concern, should always be our number one concern. And maybe most of all, we need to be transparent, right? We need to be able to understand what goes on inside of that black box, why it said what it said, why it did what it did, so that we can really stand behind those decisions that AI is making on our behalf. We start with accuracy. AI systems typically have been trained on huge amounts of data. They know a huge amount about a really wide range of topics. But if we're asking a question about a document, we actually don't want our AI to give that generic answer based on all that information it was trained on. We want an answer that's based specifically on the document that we're looking at. And this is called contextual grounding, being grounded in the information source that we're asking about. And we can employ some technology guardrails here that wrap around that whole AI system and check each response to make sure that the information the AI is serving back can only have come from that document source that we're looking at. There's another type of guardrail too called a denied topic guardrail. We would never want a chatbot to give financial advice, which we could be held liable for, as an example. So again, the guardrail wraps around the system, validating each of those responses to ensure that it's not wandering into an area like advice or whatever else we've configured up as a denied topic. So these guardrails together can monitor any AI conversation, and if any potentially harmful content is detected, can shut down that conversation before that harmful content reaches a user. So this is a technology solve. But we also need humans in the loop as well at key points in the process for approvals, for escalations, just like we do when we have people in the loop for human decision making. If we think about the systems we employ today, those human systems, people make decisions, there are approval steps, there is oversight and governance. So those human systems we have in place today to manage human decision making are really great candidates to port across to use in our AI applications. AI is founded on data, and data security, like we have said, is always top of mind. Prompt injection is the number one risk today associated with generative AI. And prompt injection means that users are trying to craft a question or ask a question in a certain way to get the AI to reveal something it shouldn't or behave in a way that we don't want it to. So guardrails play a role here too. Guardrails can monitor that conversation between the user and the AI, and they can analyze the intent behind a user's question. If they detect that the intent seems to be negative or harmful, again, they can shut down that conversation before any harmful content reaches a user. Having data physically separated also helps into different knowledge silos, so we can be 100% certain that we're not going to have data leaking from one carrier to another, from one customer to another, because they're in physically separate locations. This can actually also help to improve the quality of responses by having more focused, detailed knowledge sets. So if we're asking the AI a detailed question, it has that more concise, more focused knowledge to answer on. And then Steve spoke about PII. We need robust solutions for handling PII to make sure it's redacted from responses, but also from logs, also from audit trails. AI can play a role here too. It can achieve this by automatically detecting the PII in the conversation, being to strip it away. So in any fully operational AI platform, it's not unusual actually to have multiple AIs working together. Maybe one is serving up the response, maybe another one is monitoring for those guardrails, for the denied topics, for the bad intent. Maybe we've got another one monitoring for PII. So although AI definitely does introduce new risks, AI is also part of the solution to addressing them as well. Reliability. Reliability starts with having really good metrics. What is our ground truth? What is our benchmark answer? What does good look like? And we need to establish those things up front so that we have a really good baseline to assess the quality of our AI systems answers. There are some additional testing challenges as well with AI because generative AI does not always answer in the same way. It has that fluctuation, it has that variation. If you ask the same thing 5 times, you're likely to get 5 slightly different answers in the response. So our testing needs to change. We're not looking for does the answer equal X? We're looking for is the answer within a certain tolerance of X? We're using AI to understand the meaning behind what the system said and the meaning behind our benchmark answer that our user wrote, and then comparing those two things together. So this is called similarity scoring. There are metrics out there like BERT score that can be used to rank an answer purely based on meaning, even if the words actually slightly fluctuate and are different. We also need to make sure we've got that really solid foundation of data quality. If the data is bad, everything downstream of that is going to be bad also. So expect to spend a significant amount of your time in getting the data into a really good state, preparing that data to enable your AI initiatives. And ensure also that you've got a good governance structure in place. AI is becoming more human-like and needs those human systems in place to manage it. So if you think of the checks and balances that you would have in place for an intern, there would be structured training, there would be regular oversight. It's really unlikely that you would send a piece of work out the door without checking it first. Treat AI systems in the same way. Think about those human systems we have in place to manage decision making and apply those on top of our AI systems as well with good governance. And then finally, transparency. We need to make sure that users are always aware when they're interacting with AI, even if that is just labeling it on the screen that this is an AI decision or you're talking to an AI agent. We used to invest in explainable AI or XAI. This is a growing, evolving area. It can be complex to implement, but it's really critical that we understand why the system said what it said or did what it did. It's really critical in us building trust and confidence in the platform, but it's also really important in terms of responding to challenges that people may bring around decisions. People may want to know, why did the AI tell me this? And we need to be able to stand behind that decision and explain why it said what it said. And Steve also mentioned bias. Be aware of bias in data. If a certain market segment is underrepresented, that bias is only going to be reinforced and amplified in any AI system that you build on top of that data. AI tools can help us identify bias. They can also help us to correct bias because they can help by generating sample data to plug in those holes in our data sets, in those underrepresented segments in our data sets. So accuracy, reliability, security, and transparency, 4 key pillars in building trust in any AI system.
So we've talked about the risk with AI. We've given you some thoughts on how you can build trust in AI. But what does this all really mean, right? What can you do with this information? How can you move forward in an AI first world? Let me break it down into like kind of 2 more concepts. First, let's talk about the data and really the data that AI depends upon. So Matthew and I've already covered some about data already and highlighted how important data is to a viable AI strategy. So, really what that means is it's critical for you to focus on having a true data-driven culture, right? You want to have the underpinnings of a solid strategy for how you manage data, how you leverage data. And as you see here on the screen, really kind of you can think of it in terms of a progression from being able to leverage data for decision making and reporting, really increasing that focus to drive stronger data governance, cross enterprise data literacy, and eventually fully realizing the benefits of predictive and transformative innovations that can come from a data strategy like this. And really thinking of kind of that journey will allow you to focus on slices of your organization, slices of your data, and really drive those forward independent of each other. You don't have to solve everything in each phase before you move on to the next. Really step back and look at the strategy of things. And so, as we've solved this kind of data solution, that strategy is going to become important. So let's take a step over and look at strategy for a second. So there's a lot of pressure in the market, right? You probably get a lot of pressure. I know I hear a lot of pressure about adopt AI, drive efficiencies, gain competitive advantages. And while these pressures are very real, right? I strongly recommend that you take a moment to step back and understand your own strategy. What is the purpose and the direction you want to apply to your AI efforts? It's too easy to just throw the newest technology at a problem and hope you get the desired results. But I can guarantee that you're going to struggle to get real wins if you approach AI that way. So step back, be intentional, and really focus on where do you want to apply AI? Why do you want to apply it in those ways? What benefits you expect to gain? And use that to plan out a clear roadmap for AI adoption. That roadmap will allow you to make the right decisions in all of the areas that you see on this slide. It's going to help inform the enablement that you need to provide your employees what they need to gain the desired wins. It's going to narrow your governance efforts and your data efforts so that you can get the return on your investments and avoid trying to do everything all at once. It's going to significantly inform your decisions around where do you build something, where do you buy something? What do you need? What technologies are available? How do you best connect them to the other strategic goals of your organization? AI has such a strong hype these days that it's easy to get sucked in. Avoid that pull. Be very intentional about the why, the when, and the how you adopt AI. I think that about wraps it up, and I hope that Matthew and I have provided you with some insights and topics really to think about on your AI journey. So at this point, I think we're going to bring Kristen back in and take a couple questions.
Yep, awesome. Thanks, guys. That was great. So we did have a couple really good questions that came in, so we can get into some of those. Let's look at the first one. How do you currently evaluate the trustworthiness of AI-powered tools or processes in your business?
So I think it's starting with those ground truths, right? What does good look like? Establishing what the answers should be. So for a chatbot, that could be having an analyst write a template answer. What would they say if they were answering the same question? Then using that similarity score that we spoke about, BERT score as an example, to compare what did the AI say versus what was our benchmark answer, and actually really understanding what good looks like in that area. I think the explainable AI is super important in that area too. Understanding why the system did what it did. It is an evolving and complex area sometimes, especially with with modern LLMs. It can be difficult to understand what's going on inside that black box, but it is possible, and it's definitely something that's worth investing in if we are looking to build up that trust in the system.
Great. Thanks, Matthew. We'll go into another one. Which area feels most challenging to you? Compliance, cybersecurity, or change management, and why?
So I'll start. I think compliance probably for me is probably the most challenging one here. Compliance. It's the area we see the most change. If you think of like cybersecurity, like security is always important. Most organisations have probably got a robust cybersecurity policies in place already, and there are additional considerations with AI. But there is normally a clearer path to what the answer would be around security. With compliance, we're asking whole new questions that we've never asked before, like what happens if my application accidentally gives a customer financial advice and they act upon it. We've not had these types of questions with traditional software before. So understanding how we interact with that in a compliance environment can be difficult. These sort of novel, new things that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, I think I agree. I agree with what you said, Matthew. I think it's funny. As a technologist, I feel like I'm supposed to answer cybersecurity. I feel like it's my job to say cybersecurity is the answer here, but I think you kind of touched on it. But cybersecurity is going to get its focus, and it deserves its focus. But I think the area that will probably be the one we can easily trip over is change management. It's easier to build programs around cyber compliance, things that are more tangible. I think it's harder to build them around the people side. And so I think it's critical that we focus as much attention on our people and the changes around them. I mentioned earlier about skills gaps, fear in AI. Those are some reasons that I'd be very intentional about bringing your employees along. So I think an intentional change management program is going to be critical to success, and the companies that have it will probably outpace the ones that don't.
Great. I think we have time for one more question. So let's see if we can get to this one. How do you see AI impacting trust between your business and its customers or employees?
Um, so I think it's back to that kind of some of those human systems. So similar question: what would happen if an employee did something that damaged the trust between a business and its customers? What systems would be in place to address it? What systems should we have in place to prevent it from occurring in the first place? So as AI now is becoming more human-like, I think that, looking at it like an intern or like an employee rather than traditional software can make sure that we've got the right processes in place to govern its behavior. I think if we just rely on purely traditional QA and UAT type processes and don't consider that ongoing monitoring and oversight and human governance side, putting humans into the loop at key points, I think that's when we leave ourselves open to those sort of breach of trust concerns that you spoke about.
I'll also add, I think one of the challenges with trust in AI, and you touched on this briefly earlier, Matthew, but I want to bring it back up, is the non-deterministic aspects of generative AI. Generative AI is very much like a human in that it is going to answer in context of the situation it's in, which doesn't mean it's necessarily the same as 1 + 1 = 2. It's going to be more nuanced. It's going to be more of a true human-like answer where if you're asked the same question 5 times with slightly different context, you're going to answer it a little bit different each time. AI is going to do the same thing, at least generative AI is. And so when you get to trust, I think what's challenging is that it's too easy to assume because a computer is involved that it's going to be a 1 + 1 = 2 kind of answer. And so when it's not, then trust instantly goes away. Where to your point, if it's more like an intern, right? If you think of it like an intern, you're going to assume that they're going to give you slightly different answers based on context. You're going to assume that they might make a mistake. Where I think we've come to assume that our computer systems don't have those traits. And so I think trust becomes challenging in that regard. So I think it's worth making sure that we set the appropriate bar, we have the right controls in place, the right governance, all the things we've talked about. But I think we need to set our expectations appropriately as well and make sure that we're not making the wrong assumption when we think about whether it's trustworthy or not.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Matthew and Steve. I think that's all we have time for today. If we didn't get to your question, we'll make sure to circle back with you after the webinar. And then if you have any additional comments or questions, you can contact Matthew or Steve directly. And then as a reminder, our final session in the series is on November 20th, where we'll share real world use cases of how AI is shaping the way we work. And if you're looking for a recap of the first session from a couple weeks ago, that recording is also available to you on our website. And then we'll be sharing a recording of this session, so be on the lookout for that coming next week. And then feel free to take a moment to scan the QR code here on the screen to register to join us for the final session. And then one more thing before we go, don't forget to take our 1-question survey, letting us know if you'd like to connect further about how to manage risk while unlocking AI's potential. This will pop up automatically in your browser once the webinar ends. So thanks all so much for joining and tuning in, and that'll conclude today's session. I will see you on the next one. Thanks, everyone.